You know, when you think of famous assassinations, this is probably the one that comes to mind. It's an incredible story of ambition, betrayal, and just wild irony that literally changed the course of history. So today, we're going to break down the final day of Julius Caesar and the massive conspiracy that brought down a giant. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's just jump right in, right to the heart of the action. We're talking about the final, super tense moments of Caesar's life, where this deadly, elaborate trap was just about to snap shut.
The place is Rome. The date, the Ides of March, 44 BC. And Julius Caesar, the single most powerful man in the entire republic, is walking into a Senate meeting. But this isn't some normal session. Not by a long shot.
You have to understand, this whole thing was planned down to the smallest detail. The meeting wasn't in the public forum, it was in a more secluded building. The exits, they were blocked by gladiators just kind of pretending to hang out, and his most loyal and frankly intimidating ally, Mark Antony, was deliberately pulled aside and distracted. The conspirator had him exactly where they wanted him, completely alone.
So you gotta ask, how did it even get to this point? To really get why dozens of powerful senators wanted Caesar dead, we've got to rewind a bit and look at the man himself and the kind of ambition that made him both a legend and a target.
Caesar's rise? I mean, it was just off the charts. He was this brilliant military commander, a super charismatic politician that the people adored, and he became incredibly wealthy. After he won a brutal civil war against his last great rival, Pompey, he was the only one left standing. The Senate, the same institution that was terrified of him, had no choice. They named him dictator, not for a year, but for life.
And this was a huge problem. See, for 500 years, the Roman Republic was built on one single sacred promise: we will never be ruled by a king again. But then you have Caesar, strolling around in royal purple, sitting on a golden throne, even putting his own face on coins. He might not have had the title of king, but boy was he acting like one. And he wasn't being subtle about it.
So, for a powerful group of senators, this behavior was more than just arrogant. It was a threat to the very soul of Rome. They genuinely believed the Republic was dying, and they came to a grim conclusion. The only way to save it was to kill the man they saw as a tyrant.
And we're not talking about a handful of guys in a back room. The scale of this conspiracy was massive. We're talking about around 60 senators. 60 of his peers, his colleagues, and in some cases, people he considered his friends, were all in on the plot to kill one man.
So who were these guys? Well, it was a really mixed bag. You had some of his former allies who felt like Caesar just wasn't rewarding their loyalty. You had enemies he had actually pardoned after the Civil War, which, talk about a decision that's going to come back to bite you. Then there were the true believers, the guys who genuinely feared for the Republic's future. And of course, you had the powerful, old money aristocrats who saw their own influence disappearing as Caesar grabbed more and more power.
They were careful about how they were going to do it too. They kicked around a few ideas, attacking him on a public street, maybe even throwing him off a bridge or ambushing him at a gladiator show, but they settled on the Senate itself. And that was a strategic choice. Why? Because weapons weren't allowed inside, so he'd have no bodyguards, and they could try to frame the whole thing not as a murder, but as a noble act to defend the Republic.
And that brings us right back to that fateful day, the Ides of March. The stage was set, the daggers were hidden under their togas, but it really seemed like the universe itself was trying to scream a warning.
Seriously, the bad omens were just piling up. A fortune teller had famously warned him to beware the Ides of March. The night before, his wife Calpurnia had this terrible nightmare where she was holding his dead, bleeding body. Then, that very morning, the priest performed sacrifices that all came back with terrifying results. Caesar, who wasn't usually superstitious, was so rattled he was actually thinking about calling the whole thing off.
So, why'd he go? He went because he was talked into it by a man he considered a close friend, Decimus Brutus, who, surprise, was one of the key conspirators. Decimus went right for Caesar's ego, pretty much mocking him for paying attention to a woman's dream and making him look weak. It was a brilliant and brutal manipulation. And it worked. Caesar went to the Senate.
And here's one of those moments in history that just makes you shake your head. As Caesar was walking to the Senate, a man supposedly ran up and shoved a scroll into his hand, begging him to read it right away. That scroll, the story goes, had the names of every single conspirator and laid out the entire plot. But the crowd was pressing in, and Caesar just never opened it. He walked right into the ambush, literally holding the one thing that could have saved him.
Okay, so he's inside, he takes his seat on his golden chair, The conspirators crowd around him, pretending they're all there to support a petition. Then one of them, Senator Julius Caesar, grabs Caesar's toga and yanks it down from his shoulders. That was it. That was the signal.
The first blow comes from behind, a dagger that just grazes his shoulder. Caesar is shocked, but he spins around and actually fights back, stabbing the guy in the arm with his stylus, the metal pen he used for writing. For a second, he fights back, but a pen isn't much of a weapon here.
And then they're all on him. It's just a flurry of daggers, complete chaos. His colleagues, the senators of Rome, just descend on him in a frenzy. The autopsy later would count 23 separate stab wounds.
When it's over, the conspirators stand back, their bloody work done. And in the ultimate, most bitter twist of irony, Julius Caesar bleeds out and dies at the base of a statue of his greatest enemy, Pompey the Great, the very man he defeated to become the master of Rome.
The assassins shouted, "The tyrant is dead!" They thought they were heroes. They thought they had saved the Republic. Oh man, they could not have been more wrong. By killing Caesar, they started a chain reaction that would end up destroying the very thing they were trying to protect.
The aftermath was just chaos. Absolute chaos. Killing Caesar didn't fix anything. It created this massive power vacuum that led straight into another horrible civil war. Caesar's heir, Octavian, and his right-hand man, Mark Antony, hunted down every last one of the conspirators and killed them. The war that followed was the final nail in the coffin for the Roman Republic. And what rose from its ashes? The Roman Empire, with Caesar's adopted son as the very first emperor.
So Caesar's heir, Octavian, he learned a really important lesson from his father's death. As one historian put it, for authoritarianism to work in Rome, it couldn't be loud and proud like Caesar's was. Instead, it must wear a republican mask, however false. He basically kept all the power for himself, but maintained the illusion that the Republic was still alive and well.
Which leaves us with one last, fascinating question to think about. Caesar was famous for pardoning his enemies after he defeated them, including a lot of the same guys who would later stab him to death. So was his mercy his fatal flaw? In trying to be gracious to his rivals, did he just give them the rope to hang him with, and in doing so accidentally doomed the very republic he was accused of destroying? It's a paradox that people are still debating today.